My hands shake as I fumble with the clasp of my grandmother's pearl necklace, the same one I wore on my first date with Tommy Brennan in 1973. The irony isn't lost on me. Here I am, 67 years old, getting ready to see him again after half a century. My reflection in the bedroom mirror shows a woman I'm still getting used to. Silver hair that I finally learned to embrace, laugh lines that tell stories of 5 decades without him, and eyes that still hold the same hope they did when I was 17. The phone call came 3 weeks ago. My daughter Sarah had been organizing our annual family reunion, the one we hold every August at my late husband's family lake house. She'd tracked down distant relatives, old friends, anyone who'd been part of our extended family over the years. When she mentioned Tommy's name, my heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. "Mom, are you still there?" Sarah's voice had sounded so far away through the phone. I'd gripped the kitchen counter, remembering the last time I saw Tommy. It was September 1974, the day before he left for Vietnam. We were both crying in his old Camaro, parked behind Murphy's Diner, where we'd had our first official date. He promised he'd write every day, that he'd come back and marry me, just like we'd planned since we were kids. But letters stopped coming after 8 months, and eventually I heard through the grapevine that he'd been killed in action. Except, apparently, he wasn't. Sarah had found him living in Oregon, married for 30 years, until his wife passed 5 years ago. He'd been looking for me too, she said, had been for decades. There had been some mix-up with the casualty reports, some clerical error that had listed him among the dead when he'd actually been recovering in a military hospital in Germany. By the time he'd made it back to Minnesota, I'd already married Robert and moved to Chicago. My chest tightens as I apply lipstick, a soft rose color that Sarah says brings out the warmth in my complexion. Robert was a good man, a wonderful father to our 3 children. Our 38 years together were filled with quiet contentment, shared responsibilities, and genuine affection. But Tommy had been the fire in my veins, the reason I believed in magic, the boy who made me understand what it meant to feel truly alive. I smooth down my navy dress, the one I bought specifically for today, and take a deep breath that doesn't quite reach my lungs. What do you say to someone you've mourned for 50 years? How do you bridge that kind of time? The drive to the lake house takes 45 minutes, but it feels both eternal and instant. My hands grip the steering wheel of my Honda so tightly that my knuckles have gone white. I keep catching myself in the rearview mirror, adjusting my hair, wondering if he'll recognize the girl he once knew in this woman I've become. The lake house comes into view, and my heart hammers against my ribs like a trapped bird. Cars line the gravel driveway, Sarah's minivan, my son Michael's pickup truck, my youngest daughter Emma's hybrid. And there, at the end, a silver sedan with Oregon plates. He's here. I park and sit for a moment, watching my family through the large picture windows. They're all gathered in the living room, gesturing animatedly, probably telling stories and catching up. This is how it's always been, loud, warm, chaotic in the best possible way. But today feels different. Today, the past is about to collide with the present in ways I never imagined possible. My legs feel unsteady as I make my way up the familiar wooden steps. The screen door creaks the same way it has for 20 years, and suddenly I'm hit with the scent of my daughter-in-law's famous chocolate chip cookies and the sound of my grandson's laughter echoing from the kitchen. "Grandma Margaret's here!" 8-year-old Danny shouts, barreling toward me with arms wide open. His embrace is exactly what I need. Pure, uncomplicated love that grounds me in this moment. "Hey, sweetheart," I murmur into his hair, holding him perhaps a little longer than usual. Over his shoulder, I scan the room, but I don't see Tommy yet. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe this was all too much, too strange, too... "Mom?" Sarah appears beside us, her expression gentle but expectant. He's out on the deck with Dad's brothers. They're talking about fishing, of course. She squeezes my arm. You okay?" I nod, not trusting my voice. Robert's brothers, Jim and Pete, have always been part of our family gatherings. They'd known about Tommy, had heard the stories over the years. I wonder what they think about all this, about the ghost from my past suddenly materializing in their present. "He seems nice, Grandma," Danny pipes up, still hanging onto my waist. "He showed me pictures of his dog. Her name is Penny, and she's really, really big." My grandson's easy acceptance makes me smile despite my nerves. Children have a way of cutting through all the complicated emotions adults create and getting straight to what matters: kindness, warmth, the simple pleasure of sharing stories about beloved pets. "Should we go say hello?" Sarah asks, her voice carefully neutral. My daughter has inherited her father's diplomatic major, but I can see the curiosity and concern in her eyes. This situation is uncharted territory for all of us. I take another breath, deeper this time, and nod. We make our way through the familiar rooms, past the photo-covered walls that tell the story of our life here. Birthday parties, graduations, anniversaries, holidays. Robert smiles down at us from a dozen different frames, and for a moment I feel a pang of something that might be guilt or might be grief. He'd been gone 3 years now, and I thought I was ready to stop wearing my wedding ring, to maybe even try dating again, but I never imagined it would be like this. The sliding door to the deck whispers open, and suddenly I'm outside in the warm August afternoon. The lake stretches out before us, exactly as it has for decades, with the same dock where my grandchildren learned to swim, the same rope swing that's provided countless hours of entertainment and a few trips to the emergency room. And there he is. Tommy Brennan is standing with his back to me, leaning against the deck railing, his shoulders perhaps a little rounder than they once were, but still recognizably his. His hair has gone completely gray, and when he turns at the sound of the door, I see that time has drawn lines around his eyes and added weight to his frame. But his smile, God, his smile is exactly the same. "Maggie," he says, and my name in his voice is like hearing a favorite song after years of silence. My throat closes up completely. I can only stand there, drinking in the sight of him. This man I've carried in my heart like a beautiful scar for 50 years. He's wearing khakis and a blue button-down shirt that brings out his eyes, the same impossibly blue eyes that used to make me forget my own name. Tommy. It comes out as barely a whisper. The deck has gone quiet. Jim and Pete have stepped discreetly toward the other end, giving us space while still keeping watch. Sarah has her hand on Danny's shoulder, ready to redirect him if this moment becomes too intense for young eyes to witness. Tommy takes a step toward me, then stops, as if he's not sure what the protocol is for greeting someone you thought was lost forever. He pauses, shaking his head slightly. "You look beautiful, Maggie. Just beautiful." Heat rises in my cheeks, and I feel 17 again, standing in my parents' living room, waiting for him to pick me up for the school dance. "You look good, too," I manage. "Different, but good." He laughs, and the sound breaks something loose in my chest. "Different is one word for it. Old might be more accurate." "We're not old," I find myself saying with more conviction than I feel. "We're seasoned." This makes him laugh again, and suddenly the terrible awkwardness begins to dissolve. We're still Tommy and Maggie, still the kids who spent countless summer evenings walking around Clearwater Lake, making plans for a future that got derailed by war and circumstance and the relentless march of time. "Your family seems wonderful," he says, gesturing toward the house where I can see my children moving around inside, probably giving us privacy while staying close enough to intervene if needed. "Sarah told me about Robert. I'm sorry for your loss, Maggie. He sounds like he was a good man." The mention of my late husband should feel awkward, but somehow it doesn't. Tommy's voice holds genuine sympathy, and I realize that, of course, he understands loss. His wife died too. We've both buried people we loved, both learned to navigate the strange terrain of widowhood. He was, I say simply, and I heard about Linda. Sarah told me. I'm sorry, Tommy. He nods, looking out over the water. Cancer. It was hard. But we had 30 good years. 2 kids, 4 grandchildren. She was a wonderful woman. There's something in his voice, a tone I can't quite identify. Not regret exactly, but perhaps a kind of wistful acceptance. We stand in silence for a moment, both of us contemplating the lives we built after we lost each other. I looked for you, he says suddenly, turning back to face me. After I got out of the hospital, after I realized what had happened with the casualty reports. I came back to Minneapolis, but your parents had moved. No one knew where you'd gone. My heart clenches. I looked for you too, for years. Every time I saw a Vietnam veteran, every time I heard about someone coming home. I kept hoping. I pause, remembering those early years of my marriage when I'd scan crowds unconsciously, always searching for a familiar face that never appeared. By the time I finally accepted that you were really gone, I had a family, a different life. I'm glad, he says, and I can tell he means it. I'm glad you didn't spend your whole life waiting for a ghost. The word ghost hangs in the air between us because that's what he's been for 50 years, a beautiful, haunting presence that never quite left me alone. Even in my happiest moments with Robert, even surrounded by my children and grandchildren, there was always a small corner of my heart that belonged to the boy who never came home from the war. Except he did come home. He just came home to a different life, in a different state, to a woman who wasn't me. I start, then stop, not sure what I'm asking for. A do-over? Forgiveness for the lives we lived without each other? An explanation for why the universe played such a cruel trick on 2 kids who just wanted to love each other? Can we what? He asks gently, stepping closer. He smells like aftershave and something else, something that might be the ghost of the cologne he wore in high school. Can we sit for a while, talk? I have about 50 years worth of questions. He smiles, and for just a moment, I see the 18-year-old boy who used to sneak pebbles at my bedroom window. I've got time, Maggie, all the time in the world. We settle into the Adirondack chairs that Robert and I bought for this deck 15 years ago. The irony of sitting in these chairs, purchased for the retirement we thought we'd share, talking to the man I loved before I ever met Robert, is not lost on me. But grief and joy have always been strange bedfellows, and I've learned that life rarely offers simple, uncomplicated emotions. Can we what? He asks gently, stepping closer. He smells like aftershave and something else, something that might be the ghost of the cologne he wore in high school. Can we sit for a while, talk? I have about 50 years worth of questions. He smiles, and for just a moment, I see the 18-year-old boy who used to sneak pebbles at my bedroom window. I've got time, Maggie, all the time in the world. We settle into the Adirondack chairs that Robert and I bought for this deck 15 years ago. The irony of sitting in these chairs, purchased for the retirement we thought we'd share, talking to the man I loved before I ever met Robert, is not lost on me. But grief and joy have always been strange bedfellows, and I've learned that life rarely offers simple, uncomplicated emotions. Tommy has brought 2 glasses of lemonade from inside, and I watch his hands as he sets mine on the small table between our chairs. His fingers are more gnarled than they once were, marked by decades of work I know nothing about, but they're still unmistakably his hands. I remember those hands holding mine as we walked around the lake, remember them gentle on my face the night before he left for Vietnam. So, he says, settling back in his chair with a slight grunt that makes me smile, Oregon. What took you to Oregon? Linda was from Portland, he explains, staring out at the water. I met her at a Veterans Administration hospital where she was working as a nurse. Let's just say I wasn't in great shape when I got back, physically or otherwise. I want to ask about his injuries, about what happened to him during those missing months when I thought he was dead, but something in his voice tells me that's territory we'll need to approach carefully. She helped me put myself back together, he continues, literally and figuratively. By the time I was ready to come back to Minnesota, she was pregnant with our first child, and it seemed like maybe starting over somewhere new was the right thing to do. I nod, understanding more than he might realize. Robert had helped me put myself back together too, after the devastation of losing Tommy. We'd met at a church social in Chicago, where I'd moved to stay with my aunt after my parents decided they needed a fresh start somewhere, without so many memories of their daughter's first heartbreak. Tell me about your children, I say, because this feels safe, familiar territory. As parents, we have common ground that doesn't require navigating the minefield of our shared past. His face lights up in a way that makes him look decades younger. David is 48, a high school principal in Eugene, married to a lovely woman named Carol, 3 kids. And Jennifer is 45. She's a pediatric nurse like her mother was. 2 children, divorced last year, but she's doing well. I do the math in my head. David was born in 1976, just 2 years after Tommy left for Vietnam. By then, I was already 6 months married to Robert and starting to show with Sarah. "What about yours?" he asks. "Sarah seems like quite something. The way she tracked me down, organized all this," he gestures toward the house. "She's got your determination." I laugh, remembering 17-year-old me insisting we could make our relationship work despite the war, despite the distance, despite everyone telling us we were too young to make such serious commitments. She definitely got my stubborn streak. Sarah's 39, married to a wonderful man named David. Yes, same name as your son. Funny how that works. They have Danny, who you met, and twin girls who are 15 and absolutely convinced they know everything about everything. "Teenagers," Tommy says with the knowing smile of someone who's survived that particular adventure. "Are they here today?" "No, they're at summer camp." Probably for the best. They would have spent the entire day interrogating you about your intentions regarding their grandmother. The word slips out before I can stop it, and I feel heat rise in my cheeks. Intentions. As if we're teenagers again? As if my granddaughters have any right to vet the romantic prospects of a woman who's old enough to make her own decisions. But Tommy doesn't seem fazed. "Smart girls," he says, "looking out for their grandmother. I like that." I take a sip of lemonade to buy myself time to recover from my embarrassment. My son Michael is 36, married to the woman who makes those amazing cookies you probably smelled. They live about 20 minutes from here with their 2 boys. And Emma is 34, my baby. She's a teacher, unmarried, but dating someone she's crazy about. 3 kids, he says thoughtfully. You and Robert had a good life together. It's not a question, but I answer anyway. We did. It was different from. I pause, not sure how to finish that sentence without sounding like I'm diminishing my marriage or romanticizing our teenage love affair. "Different from what we had," he finishes gently. "I know. Linda and I had a good life too, but it was different from what we had as well. I think maybe that's okay, Maggie. I think maybe we were both lucky to have 2 different kinds of love in our lives." His words settle something in my chest that I didn't even realize was unsettled. For years, I've carried a low-level guilt about the small corner of my heart that never quite belonged to Robert, the part of me that always wondered what if. But Tommy's right. We were both lucky to love and be loved in return, even if it wasn't the way we originally planned. Do you ever wonder, though? I ask, emboldened by his understanding. What would have happened if the Army hadn't screwed up their paperwork? If I'd made it back when I was supposed to? He's quiet for a long moment, watching a pair of ducks paddle across the lake. I used to, especially in the early years with Linda, when I was still healing and she was pregnant and everything felt so overwhelming. I'd wonder what you were doing, whether you were happy, whether you ever thought about me. Every day, I admit quietly. For the first few years anyway. Then just often. On your birthday, on the anniversary of when you left, whenever I heard certain songs or smelled Old Spice or saw someone who looked like you from behind. He turned to look at me, and there's something in his expression I can't quite read. Old Spice, really? I nod, feeling ridiculous but unable to stop myself from continuing. You wore it to our senior prom. I kept the corsage you gave me until it completely fell apart. And even years later, whenever I smelled that cologne, I'd think of dancing with you in the school gym. I switched to a different aftershave after I got married, he says quietly. Linda always said Old Spice reminded her of her grandfather. We sit with that revelation for a moment. Even in our separate lives, even married to other people, the small details of our shared past maintained their power to shape our choices. From inside the house comes the sound of laughter and conversation, the normal rhythms of a family gathering. But out here on the deck, it feels like Tommy and I exist in a bubble outside of time, where the past 50 years are both completely real and utterly meaningless. What do we do now? I ask, surprising myself with the question. I hadn't meant to be so direct, but there it is, hanging in the air between us like a challenge. Tommy shifts in his chair to face me more directly. What do you want to do, Maggie? It's such a simple question, but it opens up a chasm of possibilities I'm not sure I'm ready to contemplate. What do I want? To be 17 again? To erase the last 50 years and pick up where we left off? To introduce this man to my children as what? An old friend? The one who got away? The love of my life who inconveniently turned out not to be dead? I don't know, I admit. This is also... I gesture helplessly. Complicated, he supplies. That's putting it mildly. I lean back in my chair and close my eyes, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun on my face. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting here having this conversation, I would have recommended they seek professional help. 6 months ago, I was still talking to Linda's picture every morning over coffee, Tommy says, telling her about my day ahead, asking her opinion about whether I should plant tomatoes or just stick with herbs in the garden. The image of him maintaining that daily ritual with his deceased wife makes my chest ache with sympathy. Do you still do that? Sometimes. Less often now, but sometimes. He pauses, then adds with a small smile. I told her about you, you know, about Sarah's call, about coming here today. Asked her what she thought I should do. Despite the strangeness of the situation, I find myself curious rather than jealous. What did she say? She told me to stop being an old fool and go see if the girl I never stopped wondering about had grown into a woman worth knowing. Tears spring to my eyes without warning. The generosity of spirit it would take for a woman to encourage her widowed husband to reconnect with his first love, even in imagination, even in the private conversations of grief. It speaks to the kind of person Linda must have been and the kind of marriage they must have had. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, I manage. She was. You would have liked her, I think. She had your sense of humor, your way of getting straight to the point when something needed to be said. It should be weird, this comparison between his deceased wife and me, but somehow it isn't. It feels like a gift, actually, this glimpse into the woman who took care of the man I'd never stopped loving. Can I ask you something? I say, wiping at my eyes with the back of my hand. Anything. Are you happy? I mean, overall, with how your life turned out? Because if this is just some kind of midlife crisis or grief reaction or... He holds up a hand to stop me. I had a good life with Linda, Maggie, a full life. We raised 2 wonderful children, built a home together, supported each other through everything life threw at us. I don't regret any of that. But I can hear there's more. But there was always a part of me that wondered, And now that I'm sitting here with you, now that I can see the woman you became, I'm not wondering anymore. What do you mean? He leans forward in his chair, his blue eyes more serious than I've seen them since he turned around and said my name. I mean, I think maybe some people are lucky enough to get a second chance at something they thought they'd lost forever. And I think maybe we're those people. Before I can process what he's just said, the sliding door opens and Sarah steps out onto the deck. Her expression is carefully neutral, but I can see the curiosity practically radiating from her. "Sorry to interrupt," she says, though she doesn't look particularly sorry, "but dinner's ready and the kids are getting restless." I glance at my watch, startled to realize we've been talking for over 2 hours. It feels like minutes and decades simultaneously. "Of course," I say, starting to rise from my chair. Tommy is immediately on his feet, offering me his hand in a gesture so automatic and gentlemanly that it takes me back 50 years in an instant. His fingers are warm and slightly rough, and when I stand, I'm closer to him than I've been since he arrived. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, close enough to catch that hint of familiar cologne beneath his aftershave. "Thank you," I murmur, though I'm not entirely sure what I'm thanking him for. Sarah leads us back into the house, and I'm struck by how normal everything looks, despite the fact that my entire world has shifted on its axis in the span of one afternoon. Danny is setting the table with intense concentration, my daughter-in-law Beth is pulling a casserole from the oven, and my son Michael is opening wine while deep in conversation with his uncles. "Mom," Michael says when he sees me, crossing the room to give me a hug, "you okay?" It's such a loaded question. Am I okay? My first love, whom I've mourned for 50 years, has materialized in my family's lake house and just suggested we might deserve a second chance at happiness. My carefully organized life as Robert's widow, grandmother to 5, pillar of my church community, has just been turned upside down by a man with gray hair and blue eyes who still makes my heart race. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I tell my son, because what else can I say? Michael studies my face with the same intense attention he's given everything since he was a toddler. "You sure? Because this is all pretty." "Weird," I supply helpfully. "I was going to say a lot," he says with a smile, "but weird works too." Dinner is surprisingly normal, all things considered. Tommy fits into our family dynamics with an ease that's both wonderful and slightly unsettling. He tells stories about his grandchildren that make Danny laugh, asks Beth about her teaching career, and discusses fishing with Jim and Pete as if he's been part of our summer gatherings for years. I find myself watching him interact with my family and feeling a strange doubling sensation, as if I'm seeing 2 different versions of reality simultaneously. In one, he's a stranger, a man I used to know half a century ago, who's now making polite conversation with my children. In the other, he's Tommy, the boy who was supposed to be part of all these family dinners, who should have been here for birthday parties and graduations and holiday celebrations. "Grandma Maggie," Danny says, pulling me from my reverie, "Mr. Tommy said he has a boat. Can we go fishing tomorrow?" My grandson's easy acceptance of our visitor makes me smile. To an 8-year-old, the complexities of adult relationships are irrelevant. What matters is that this nice man has a boat and might take him fishing. "Well," I say, glancing at Tommy, "I think that depends on whether Mr. Tommy is planning to stay in town tonight." It's a question disguised as a casual comment, but everyone at the table understands what I'm really asking. Tommy meets my eyes across the dinner table, and I see a flicker of uncertainty there. "I was planning to drive back to Minneapolis tonight," he says carefully. "I have a hotel room near the airport. My flight back to Portland is tomorrow evening." The disappointment that hits me is so sharp and unexpected that I have to look down at my plate to hide it. Of course he's leaving. What did I expect? That he'd stay indefinitely? That would figure out 50 years of separation over a long weekend? "But," Tommy continues, and I look up to find him still watching me, "I could always change my flight if there's a reason to stay." The question hangs in the air like a dare. Around the table, my family has gone very still, sensing the undercurrents they don't fully understand. Sarah is looking between Tommy and me with the expression she used to get as a child when she was trying to solve a particularly challenging puzzle. There might be, I hear myself say, my voice steadier than I feel. Danny would be very disappointed if you left without taking him fishing. Tommy's smile is slow and warm. Well, we can't disappoint Danny. No, I agree, returning his smile. We certainly can't. The conversation moves on to other topics, but I'm hyper aware of Tommy beside me, of the way he passes the salt before I ask for it, the way he laughs at Michael's stories about his boys, the way he fits into our family circle as if he's always belonged there. After dinner, while the younger generation tackles the dishes, Tommy and I find ourselves alone on the deck again. The sun is setting over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and rose that remind me of summer evenings from my childhood. Your family is wonderful, Tommy says, settling into the same chair he'd occupied earlier. Really, Maggie, you raised good kids. Robert and I raised good kids, I correct automatically, then wonder why I felt the need to make that distinction. Robert and you, he agrees. I'm sorry I never got to meet him. From everything everyone said today, he sounds like he was exactly the kind of man you deserved. There's no jealousy in his voice, no bitterness at the mention of my late husband. Just genuine respect for the life I built with someone else, and I find myself falling for him all over again because of it. What happens now, Tommy? I ask, echoing my earlier question, but with more urgency. I mean, really, what happens? He's quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. When he finally speaks, his voice is thoughtful and careful. I don't know, he admits. I came here thinking maybe we could have some closure, say goodbye properly this time, put the past to rest. But sitting here with you, talking with your family, he shakes his head. This doesn't feel like goodbye, Maggie. My heart is beating so hard, I'm surprised he can't hear it. What does it feel like? Like maybe Linda was right. Like maybe I should stop being an old fool and see where this goes. The words hang between us, full of possibility and terror in equal measure. I think about my orderly life back in Chicago, my routines, my book club and garden club, and the comfortable predictability of widowhood. I think about Tommy's life in Oregon, his children and grandchildren, the home he built with Linda. We live 2,000 miles apart, I point out, though my voice lacks conviction. People have figured out bigger obstacles than geography. We're in our 60s, Tommy. We're not kids who can just pack up and follow our hearts wherever they lead. Aren't we? He turns to face me fully, and there's something in his expression that takes my breath away. Maybe that's exactly what we are, Maggie. Maybe getting older just means we finally have the wisdom to know what really matters. Before I can respond, the sliding door opens and Sarah appears with a pot of coffee and 3 mugs on a tray. I thought you might like some coffee, she says, though her real purpose is clearly to check on us. And I wanted to apologize in advance. Danny's already planning your fishing expedition. He's drawn you a map of where he thinks the best fish live. Tommy laughs, accepting a mug of coffee with obvious pleasure. I'd love to see his map. Is he much of a fisherman? Terrible, Sarah says cheerfully. Absolutely terrible. He talks too much and scares all the fish away, but he loves it anyway. The best kind of fishing partner, Tommy says, and I can see Sarah warming to him despite her protective instincts where I'm concerned. Can I ask you something, Mr. Brennan? Sarah settles into the 3rd chair, clearly planning to stay for this conversation. Tommy, please, and of course, what are your intentions here? The question comes out bluntly, without preamble, and I want to sink through the deck floor. Sarah, I protest, but Tommy holds up a hand. No, it's a fair question. She's looking out for her mother, and I respect that. He meets Sarah's eyes directly, and I can see my daughter evaluating him with the same intensity she brings to everything important in her life. My intentions, Tommy says carefully, are to be honest with your mother and with myself about what this is and what it might become. I'm not here to disrupt her life or cause her pain. I'm here because I never stopped wondering about the girl I fell in love with when I was 17, and because that girl grew up to be a woman I'd very much like to get to know. Sarah studies him for a moment, then nods. That's a good answer. Sarah, I say again, mortified by my daughter's interrogation tactics. What? You'd rather I let him break your heart without asking any hard questions first? Sarah turns to me with the exasperated expression she perfected as a teenager. Mom, you've been alone for 3 years. You deserve to be happy, but you also deserve to be protected from men who might not have your best interests at heart. I'm 67 years old, I point out. I think I can protect myself. Can you? Sarah challenges. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like you're 17 again, and 17-year-old you made some pretty questionable decisions about boys. Tommy chokes on his coffee, clearly trying not to laugh. Questionable decisions? She snuck out of the house to meet you at midnight no fewer than 6 times, Sarah informs him. Got grounded for a month after the last time. And don't even get me started on the time she drove your car without a license because you'd had your wisdom teeth out and couldn't drive yourself to the follow-up appointment. Now Tommy is openly laughing, and I'm torn between mortification and amusement. Your mother always was loyal to a fault, he tells Sarah. I'm glad to see that hasn't changed. It hasn't, Sarah agrees, which is why I need to know that you're not going to disappear on her again. Because honestly, Mr. Brennan, Tommy, I don't think she could survive losing you twice. The bluntness of her statement hits all 3 of us like a physical blow. Sarah, realizing what she's just revealed, looks stricken, and I feel exposed in a way that makes me want to flee to the safety of my own home, my own life, my own carefully constructed emotional barriers. But Tommy's response surprises me. Neither could I, he says quietly, meeting Sarah's eyes and then mine. Neither could I. Later that evening, after Tommy has gotten directions to a local bed and breakfast and promised to return in the morning for Danny's fishing expedition, after my children have made their polite but cautious goodbyes, after the dishes are done and the house is quiet, I find myself alone on the deck again, wrapped in one of Robert's old sweaters and trying to make sense of the day. The lake is dark now, reflecting the stars and the sliver of moon that's just appeared over the tree line. Somewhere across the water, a loon calls, its haunting voice echoing my own internal confusion. My phone buzzes with a text message, and I'm surprised to see Tommy's name on the screen. Sarah must have given him my number. Thank you for today, the message reads. It was better than I ever imagined it could be. Sleep well, Maggie. I stare at the phone for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What do you say to a message like that? How do you respond to someone who's just walked back into your life after 50 years and made you feel like you're waking up from a dream you didn't even know you were having? Finally, I type back, "Thank you for coming. See you tomorrow for fishing." It's safe, non-committal, the kind of response that doesn't reveal the fact that my hands are shaking as I type it. But before I can second-guess myself, I add, "I'm glad you're not dead, Tommy Brennan." His response comes almost immediately. "Me too, Maggie girl, me too." Maggie girl. He used to call me that when we were teenagers, usually when he was trying to talk me into something I wasn't sure about, sneaking out to meet him, cutting class to go to the lake, saying yes when he suggested we start talking about marriage even though we were still in high school. The memory makes me smile despite my confusion. I tuck the phone into my sweater pocket and lean back in the chair, listening to the gentle lap of water against the dock. Tomorrow, Tommy will take my grandson fishing. Tomorrow, we'll have to navigate the morning after awkwardness of yesterday's revelations. Tomorrow, I'll have to figure out what it means that my first love is alive and sitting in my family's lake house talking about second chances. But tonight, I'm just going to sit here under the stars and let myself remember what it felt like to be 17 and completely, utterly certain that love could conquer anything, even if it took 50 years to prove it. I wake up at 6:30, which is ridiculous because I'm on vacation and Danny won't be up for at least another hour. But my body apparently doesn't care about vacation schedules when there are life-altering emotional situations to process. I lie in bed for a few minutes, listening to the familiar sounds of the lake house in the morning, the old floorboards settling, the gentle whoosh of wind through the pine trees, the distant call of geese flying overhead. Robert and I used to love these quiet morning moments when the house was still asleep and we could drink our coffee on the deck and plan our day in comfortable silence. The memory doesn't bring the sharp pang of grief it once did. Instead, I find myself wondering what Robert would think about yesterday, about Tommy's reappearance in my life. He'd been a practical man, my husband, not given to jealousy or dramatic emotions. I think he'd want me to be happy, even if that happiness came in a form neither of us could have anticipated. I get up and make coffee, moving quietly through the kitchen so I don't wake anyone. The house feels different in the early morning light, charged with possibility, in a way that makes me feel simultaneously excited and terrified. Through the kitchen window, I can see the lake beginning to shimmer with the first rays of sunlight. It's going to be a beautiful day for fishing, assuming Tommy actually shows up, and this wasn't all some elaborate dream my lonely heart conjured up. But at 8 o'clock sharp, I hear a car in the driveway, and my heart starts that ridiculous rapid beating again. I peer through the front window and see Tommy getting out of a silver sedan, looking remarkably put together for someone who spent the night in an unfamiliar bed and breakfast. He's wearing jeans and a faded flannel shirt that makes him look like the man he became rather than the boy I remember, and I realize I prefer this version. This Tommy has substance, gravitas, the kind of quiet confidence that comes from surviving decades of real life. I open the front door before he can knock, partly to avoid waking the house, and partly because I can't bear to wait those extra few seconds. "Good morning," I say softly, stepping out onto the porch. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep," he admits with a rueful smile. "Too much excitement, I guess, like the night before Christmas when I was 7. The comparison makes me laugh despite my nerves. I was up early too. Coffee? Please." I lead him back to the kitchen, hyper-aware of his presence behind me, of the way he moves through my family's space as if he belongs there. We work together in comfortable silence. I pour coffee while he finds cream in the refrigerator. He locates the sugar bowl while I grab mugs from the cabinet. "This is nice," he says, settling at the kitchen table with his coffee. "The house, I mean. It feels like a real family place." "Robert's family has owned it for 40 years, I tell him, sitting across from him. "We've been coming here every summer since the kids were small. It's," I pause, searching for the right words, "it's where all our best memories live. And now I'm here," Tommy says quietly, "in the middle of all those memories." "Yes," I agree, "you are." We drink our coffee and watch the sun climb higher over the lake, both of us lost in our own thoughts. It should be awkward, this morning after uncertainty, but somehow it isn't. It feels like we're simply picking up a conversation that was interrupted 50 years ago. "Maggie," Tommy says eventually, his voice serious enough to make me look up from my mug, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Yesterday, when your daughter asked about my intentions," he pauses, running his hand through his gray hair, "I gave her the honest answer, but I'm not sure I gave you the complete answer." My heart starts that rapid beating again. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I didn't just come here for closure, and I'm not just curious about the woman you became." I came here because in 50 years of marriage to a wonderful woman, of raising children and building a life and doing all the things adults are supposed to do, I never stopped loving you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my coffee mug with shaking hands and stared at him across the table. "Tommy." "I know it's crazy," he continues, his blue eyes intense and honest. "I know we're not the same people we were at 17. I know you had a good marriage with Robert, and I had a good marriage with Linda. But Maggie, some things don't change, and the way I feel about you is one of them." I'm opening my mouth to respond when Danny comes barreling into the kitchen, still in his pajamas but wide awake and clearly thrilled to see our visitor. "Mr. Tommy, you came back? Are we going fishing now? Can we? I got my fishing map and my lucky hat and everything." The moment shatters, but maybe that's for the best. Tommy's declaration hangs in the air between us, too big and too important to process while my grandson is bouncing around the kitchen in his excitement. "Good morning, Danny," Tommy says, his voice warm and steady, despite the intensity of what just passed between us. "I think we should probably wait for your mom and dad to wake up before we go fishing, don't you?" "They're already awake," Danny announces. "I heard them talking in their room. Mom said I couldn't come downstairs until 8 o'clock, but it's 8:05 now, so I think that counts." Right on cue, Sarah appears in the kitchen doorway, already dressed and looking like she's been awake for hours. "Morning, Mom." "Tommy." She nods to both of us, her expression carefully neutral. "I found him in the kitchen," Danny corrects, "having coffee with Grandma Maggie. Are you ready to go fishing, Mr. Tommy?" "Almost," Tommy says, rising from the table. "But first, I need to go get my fishing gear from the car, and maybe we should make sure your grandma wants to come with us." All eyes turn to me, and I realize I haven't actually been invited on this fishing expedition. It was supposed to be Danny and Tommy, a chance for them to bond, while I, sat in the house and processed the fact that my first love just told me he never stopped loving me? "I'd love to come," I hear myself saying, though I haven't been fishing in years and am not entirely sure I remember how. "Really?" Danny's face lights up like I've just offered him the greatest gift in the world. "Really," I confirm, smiling at his enthusiasm. "Just let me change into something more appropriate for fish catching." 20 minutes later, I'm wearing jeans and one of Robert's old fishing shirts, carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag of sandwiches Beth packed for our expedition. Tommy has produced an impressive array of fishing equipment from his rental car, and Danny is vibrating with excitement as we make our way down to the dock. "This is going to be the best fishing trip ever," Danny announces as Tommy helps him into a life jacket. "I'm going to catch the biggest fish in the whole lake." "That's the spirit," Tommy says with a grin. "Though remember, sometimes the best fishing trips are the ones where you don't catch anything at all." "How can that be the best if you don't catch fish?" Danny asks, clearly confused by this adult logic. Tommy glances at me over Danny's head, and there's something in his expression that makes my heart skip. "Sometimes," he says, "the fishing is just an excuse to spend time with people you care about." We settle into Tommy's small fishing boat. Apparently, he'd rented it along with the car, another indication that this trip was planned with more care than I'd realized. Danny immediately begins chattering about his fishing strategy, pointing to various parts of the lake and explaining his theories about where the fish might be hiding. Tommy listens with the kind of serious attention that children crave, asking questions and nodding thoughtfully at Danny's answers. Watching them together, I'm struck by how natural this feels, how easily Tommy has slipped into the role of honorary grandfather. "What do you think, Grandma Maggie?" Danny asks, pulling me from my reverie. "Should we try by the fallen tree first or go straight to the deep part by the point?" "I think," I say, settling more comfortably in my seat, "we should let Captain Tommy decide. He's the expert here." Captain Tommy, Danny claps his hands in delight. I like that. Can I be first mate Danny? Absolutely, Tommy says, steering us toward the fallen tree Danny had pointed out. Every good captain needs a reliable first mate. As we set up our lines and settle in to wait for fish, I find myself relaxing in a way I haven't in months. There's something deeply peaceful about being on the water, surrounded by the familiar sounds of nature and the comfortable chatter of my grandson and this man who used to be the center of my universe. Tell me about your grandchildren, Tommy, I say as we wait for the fish to bite. What are they like? His face lights up exactly the way mine does when anyone asks about my grandkids. Well, David's oldest is 16 and thinks he knows everything about everything. Sounds familiar, right? His name is Michael, and he's actually a pretty good kid despite the teenage attitude. Plays hockey, wants to be a marine biologist. After his grandfather's military service, I ask. Maybe. David named him after me. My middle name is Michael. It was really something, holding my grandson and knowing he carried my name forward. Tommy pauses, adjusting his fishing line. Then there's Emma. She's 14 and absolutely brilliant. Straight A's, plays violin, speaks 3 languages. And little Jake is 12, the athlete of the family. Soccer, baseball, swimming, that kid never sits still. They sound wonderful, I say, and I mean it. There's something beautiful about the way his voice changes when he talks about his grandchildren. The same warmth and pride I hear in my own voice when I discuss Danny and his cousins. Jennifer's kids are younger, he continues. Sophie is 10, and she's going to be an artist, I guarantee it. She's always drawing or painting or making something with her hands. And Charlie is 8, same age as Danny here, and he's the family comedian, always making jokes, always trying to make everyone laugh. Like someone else I used to know, I say without thinking, then feel heat rise in my cheeks as Tommy catches my meaning. I was never that funny, he protests, but he's smiling. You were to me, I admit quietly. We're interrupted by Danny's excited shout of, I got one! I got one! And the next few minutes are chaos as Tommy helps him reel in a respectable-sized bass while I cheer and take pictures with my phone. This is definitely going in the record books, Tommy declares as we release the fish back into the lake. First mate Danny's first catch of the day. Can we catch another one? Danny asks, immediately casting his line back into the water. We can try, Tommy says. But remember, patience is the most important part of fishing. That's what Grandpa Robert always said, Danny announces cheerfully. He said fishing was really just an excuse to sit quietly and think about stuff. The mention of my late husband should feel awkward, but somehow it doesn't. Danny's matter-of-fact acceptance of both grandfathers, the one he knew and the one he's just met, is exactly the kind of emotional wisdom children possess without even realizing it. Your Grandpa Robert was a smart man, Tommy says gently. What kind of stuff did you think about when you went fishing with him? Important stuff, Danny says seriously, like whether fish get thirsty and why some clouds look like animals, and if baseball players dream about hitting home runs. Tommy laughs, and the sound carries across the water like music. Those are very important questions indeed. We fish for another hour, catching 2 more bass and a sunfish that Danny insists on naming Gerald before we release him. The conversation flows easily between the 3 of us, touching on everything from Danny's school projects to Tommy's plans for his garden next spring to my ongoing battle with the neighborhood raccoons who keep raiding my bird feeders. It's comfortable and natural and absolutely terrifying in its rightness. I'm hungry, Danny announces eventually. Can we have the sandwiches now? We anchor the boat in a quiet cove and break out the lunch Beth packed. As we eat, Danny regales us with stories about his friends at school, his baseball team, and his complex theories about why his twin aunts are totally weird but also kind of cool. Do you have any kids, Mr. Tommy? Danny asks around a mouthful of peanut butter and jelly. I do, Tommy says. 2 kids, both grown up now, and 5 grandchildren. 5? Wow, Danny's eyes widen. Did they like fishing? Some of them do. Michael, he's about your age, loves it. We go fishing together whenever I visit. Maybe they could come visit here sometime, Danny suggests with the easy optimism of childhood. We could all go fishing together. That would be really fun. I catch Tommy's eye over Danny's head, and we share a look that's full of questions neither of us knows how to answer. The casual way Danny has absorbed Tommy into our family narrative, his assumption that this is the beginning of something rather than a one-time reunion, forces us to confront the questions we've been dancing around. What happens next? Is this just a lovely weekend interlude, or are we actually going to try to build something together? And if we are, how do we merge 2 completely separate lives? 2 sets of children and grandchildren, 2 different states and histories and ways of being in the world. That sounds like a great idea, buddy, Tommy says carefully. Maybe someday. But I can see in his eyes that he's thinking the same thing I am. Someday might be sooner than either of us is prepared for. By the time we return to the dock, it's nearly 3 o'clock, and Danny is sun-tired and happy, chattering excitedly about showing his mother the pictures of his fish. The rest of my family has spent the day hiking and swimming, and they're gathered on the deck sharing stories of their own adventures. How was the fishing expedition? Sarah asks as we climb up from the dock, her eyes moving between Tommy and me with that evaluating look she's perfected. Epic, Danny announces. I caught 3 fish, and Mr. Tommy told me all about his grandgrandma. And Grandma Maggie only got her line tangled up twice. Only twice? Michael grins at me. That's a new record for you, Mom. Very funny, I say, but I'm smiling. The day on the water has left me feeling relaxed and happy in a way I haven't experienced in months. Tommy, Emma says, appearing at my elbow with a glass of iced tea for our guest, Danny's been telling us about your grandchildren. They sound wonderful. They are, Tommy agrees, accepting the tea with a grateful smile, though I may be slightly biased. Only slightly, I tease, and the easy banter feels so natural that I almost forget this is only our 2nd day together in 50 years. We settle into the deck chairs, and the conversation flows around topics both mundane and meaningful: the best hiking trails in the area, Danny's upcoming school year, Tommy's plans for his retirement, my struggle to decide whether to downsize from the house I shared with Robert. You're thinking of selling the house? Tommy asks, and there's something in his voice that makes me look at him more closely. Maybe, I admit. It's getting too big for just me, and the maintenance is becoming overwhelming. But it's hard to think about leaving all those memories behind. Memories don't live in houses, Tommy says gently. They live in here. He touches his chest, over his heart. Trust me on that one. There's weight behind his words, and I wonder if he's speaking from experience. Did you sell your house after Linda died? Last year, he nods. Moved into a smaller place closer to Jennifer and her kids. Best decision I've made in a long time. The house we shared was full of Linda, and while that was comforting for a while, eventually it started feeling like I was living in a museum instead of a home. I nod, understanding completely. My house in Chicago is full of Robert, and while I'm not ready to let go of all those memories, I can see how staying there might be keeping me stuck in the past instead of allowing me to move toward whatever the future might hold. Where did you move to? Emma asks, clearly curious about this man who's appeared so suddenly in her mother's life. A condo in Lake Oswego, Tommy says. 2 bedrooms, small garden, community pool. It's perfect for where I am in my life right now. Lake Oswego is beautiful, Beth chimes in. David and I went to Portland for our anniversary a few years ago, and we drove through there. Gorgeous area. It is, Tommy agrees. About 20 minutes from downtown Portland, close to Jennifer and the kids, and the community is great. Lots of other people in similar situations, starting over after losing a spouse. The conversation continues, but I find myself only half listening, lost in thought about what he's just described. A new place, a fresh start, proximity to family, but not dependence on them. It sounds appealing, actually. Terrifying, but appealing. Mom? Sarah's voice breaks through my reverie. You okay? You look like you're a million miles away. Just thinking, I say, then realize everyone is looking at me expectantly. Sorry, what did I miss? Tommy was asking if you'd like to take a walk around the lake, Sarah says, and there's something in her expression I can't quite read. Before dinner. I look at Tommy, who's watching me with those blue eyes that still make my heart skip. That sounds nice, I hear myself saying. Let me just grab a sweater. 5 minutes later, we're walking down the familiar path that circles the lake. The same path I've walked countless times with Robert, with my children when they were young, with my grandchildren during our summer visits. But this time feels different, charged with the weight of unfinished conversations and unasked questions. Your family really is wonderful, Maggie, Tommy says as we walk slowly along the water's edge. I can see why you're so proud of them. They like you too, I reply. Danny's already planning your next visit. Is he? Tommy's smile is soft and warm. And what about you? Are you planning my next visit? It's such a direct question that it stops me in my tracks. We've been dancing around this all weekend, talking about everything except the elephant in the room. What happens when he gets on that plane tomorrow evening? I don't know, I admit, turning to face him. I don't know what I'm planning, Tommy. This is all so overwhelming, he supplies. I know. Believe me, I know. We walk in silence for a few minutes, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The late afternoon sun filters through the pine trees, casting long shadows across the path and painting everything in shades of gold and green. Can I tell you something? Tommy says eventually, stopping beside a large boulder that overlooks the water. Of course. When I got on the plane in Portland 3 days ago, I thought I was coming here to say goodbye. To finally put our story to rest, you know? I thought seeing you again would help me let go of the what-ifs that have been haunting me for 50 years. He pauses, picking up a smooth stone and skipping it across the water. But instead, sitting here with you, meeting your family, seeing the woman you've become, I don't want to say goodbye, Maggie. I want to say hello. My heart is pounding so hard, I'm sure he can hear it. What does that mean? It means I want to see what happens if we stop living in the past and start living in the present. It means I want to know if there's still something here worth fighting for. He turns to face me fully, his expression more serious than I've ever seen it. It means I'm falling in love with you all over again, and I think maybe you're falling in love with me too. The words hang in the air between us, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. And standing there in the golden light of late afternoon, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of the lake I've loved my entire life, I realize he's absolutely right. I am falling in love with him again, or maybe I never stopped loving him in the first place. Tommy, I whisper, but before I can say anything else, he steps closer and takes my hands in his. Maggie, he says softly, I know this is crazy. I know we're not kids anymore, and I know there are a million practical reasons why this shouldn't work. But I also know that I've spent 50 years wondering what happened to the girl I loved, and now that I've found her, I don't want to let her go again. I don't want to let you go either, I admit, the words tumbling out before I can stop them. But I'm scared, Tommy. I'm scared of getting hurt, scared of disrupting everyone's lives, scared of making a fool of myself over a man when I'm old enough to know better. We're not too old for love, Maggie, he says, lifting one hand to cup my cheek. We're not too old for second chances or new beginnings or taking risks that might just pay off in ways we never imagined. And then, there on the path beside the lake where I've walked 1,000 times before, Tommy Brennan leans down and kisses me for the first time in 50 years. It's soft and gentle and tentative at first, as if we're both afraid we might break something precious. But then my arms come up around his neck and his hands settle at my waist, and suddenly we're not two people in their 60s trying to recapture something lost. We're simply Tommy and Maggie finding our way back to each other after a very long detour. When we finally break apart, I'm breathless and dizzy and absolutely certain that my life just changed forever. "So," Tommy says, resting his forehead against mine, "what do you think? Want to see what happens next?" I think about my orderly life in Chicago, my book club and garden club, and the comfortable routines of widowhood. I think about Tommy's life in Oregon, his children and grandchildren, and the community he's built there. I think about the impossibility of merging two completely separate existences, the complexity of blending families, the sheer logistics of loving someone who lives 2,000 miles away. And then I think about the way he made Danny laugh this morning, the way he listened to my children's stories with genuine interest, the way he fits into my family as if he's always belonged there. I think about the way my heart feels when he says my name, the way 50 years collapsed into nothing the moment I saw him standing on that deck. Yes, I hear myself saying, my voice stronger and more certain than I feel. I want to see what happens next. We're walking back toward the house, hands clasped like teenagers, when we hear the sound of multiple cars pulling into the driveway. Through the trees, I can see unfamiliar vehicles parked beside the ones that belong to my family. "Expecting more company?" Tommy asks, but I shake my head, confused. "Not that I know of." As we get closer to the house, I can hear voices and laughter coming from the deck, more people than were there when we left for our walk. Tommy and I exchange puzzled glances as we climb the steps from the path. "There you are," Sarah calls out as we appear on the deck. "Perfect timing." I stop short, taking in the scene before me. In addition to my own family, there are 4 people I don't recognize, 2 middle-aged adults and 2 younger people who look like they might be in their 20s or 30s. "Mom," Sarah says, practically vibrating with excitement, "I'd like you to meet David and Jennifer Brennan and their children Michael and Sophie." My heart stops. Tommy's children, his grandchildren, they're here at my family's lake house, as if this whole impossible situation wasn't complicated enough already. How?" I stammer, looking between the new arrivals and Tommy, who looks as stunned as I feel. "I called them," Sarah announces proudly, "after you left for your walk. I figured if you two were going to figure this out, we should probably all meet each other properly." "Sarah," I breathe, mortified by my daughter's interference. But Tommy is already moving toward his son, a huge smile breaking across his face. "David, what are you doing here?" "Your future daughter-in-law is apparently very persuasive," David says, embracing his father warmly. "She tracked us down this morning and convinced us to drive up for the day, said there was someone we needed to meet." "Future daughter-in-law?" I repeat faintly, feeling like I've missed several crucial plot points. "Well," Sarah says with the satisfied expression of someone who's just pulled off a complicated surprise, "we figured if you two are going to get married, we should probably get to know each other's families." Married? Both Tommy and I say the word at the same time, and I realize that somewhere in the space of our walk around the lake, my daughter has apparently planned our entire future. "You are going to get married, aren't you?" Danny pipes up from where he's showing Tommy's grandson Michael his collection of fishing lures. "I mean, you love each other, right? And when grown-ups love each other, they get married. That's how it works." The entire deck goes silent except for the sound of Danny's matter-of-fact explanation of adult relationships. I can feel everyone's eyes on Tommy and me, waiting for our response to an 8-year-old's perfect logic. Danny, I start, my voice shaky. It's more complicated than that. Why? He asks, genuinely confused. If you love each other and you make each other happy, why is it complicated? And standing there on the deck, surrounded by both of our families, faced with the innocent wisdom of my grandson's question, I realize he's absolutely right. Why is it complicated? What are we afraid of? We're not kids anymore, worried about what our parents will think or whether we can support ourselves. We're adults who have lived full lives, raised children, survived loss and heartbreak, and the kind of challenges that teach you what really matters. What matters is love. What matters is finding someone who makes you laugh, who fits into your family, who makes you want to wake up in the morning and see what adventures the day might bring. What matters is not wasting the time you have left. I look at Tommy, and I can see the same realization dawning in his blue eyes. We're both thinking the same thing. Danny is right. Love shouldn't be complicated. We're the ones making it complicated. You know what, Danny? Tommy says, his voice steady and sure. You're absolutely right. And then, to my complete shock and the delighted gasps of everyone gathered on the deck, Tommy gets down on one knee. Margaret Ann Sullivan, he says, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket that I swear wasn't there a minute ago. I loved you when we were 17. I've loved you every day for the past 50 years, and I want to love you for whatever time we have left. Will you marry me? The deck erupts in chaos. Danny is cheering. Sarah is crying. Tommy's children are staring in shock at their father's impromptu proposal, and I'm standing there with my hand over my mouth, unable to believe this is actually happening. I had the ring in my suitcase, Tommy explains, still on his knee, still looking up at me with those impossibly blue eyes. I bought it 50 years ago, Maggie, right before I shipped out. I was going to propose when I got back, but, well, we know how that turned out. I've been carrying it with me ever since, waiting for the right moment. 50 years? He's been carrying an engagement ring for 50 years? I think about all the reasons I should say no, the practical concerns, the geographical challenges, the complexity of blending two families, the sheer audacity of getting engaged to someone I've spent exactly 2 days with in the past 5 decades. And then I think about the way he made Danny laugh this morning, the way he talked about his late wife with love and respect, the way he kissed me beside the lake and made me feel like I was coming home after a very long journey. Yes, I hear myself saying, my voice clear and strong and absolutely certain. Yes, Tommy Brennan, I'll marry you. The cheer that goes up from our assembled families is loud enough to wake the dead. Tommy slips the ring, a simple solitaire that fits perfectly as if it was always meant to be on my finger, and stands to kiss me while our children and grandchildren applaud and whistle and generally create the kind of joyful chaos that marks the best moments in life. I can't believe you've been carrying that ring for 50 years, I murmur against his lips. I can't believe I finally got to give it to you, he replies, and I can hear the wonder in his voice, as if he's as surprised by this turn of events as I am. So, Sarah says, appearing beside us with tears streaming down her cheeks, I guess we're planning a wedding? I guess we are, I say, looking around at the faces of our blended families, my children and his children, my grandson and his grandchildren, all of them beaming at us with the kind of happiness that comes from witnessing something truly magical. Can I be in the wedding? Danny asks, bouncing on his toes with excitement. Can I be the ring bearer? Michael, Tommy's grandson, chimes in. Can we have the reception here at the lake? Sophie wants to know. And as our families begin planning our future with the enthusiastic chaos that seems to define all the best family gatherings, Tommy and I step back from the crowd and look at each other in amazement. So, he says, taking my left hand and running his thumb over the ring that's been waiting 50 years to find its home. What do you think? Are we crazy? I look around at our children, talking animatedly about wedding plans, at our grandchildren, already fast friends despite having met 5 minutes ago, at the lake that's been the backdrop for so many important moments in my life and is now the setting for the most important moment of all. Absolutely, I tell him, completely, utterly, wonderfully crazy. And then I kiss him again, there in front of everyone who matters most to us, sealing a promise that should have been made 50 years ago, but somehow arrived at exactly the right moment. After all, some love stories are worth waiting for, even if it takes half a century to get to the happy ending.